to The Voyage, a podcast for women touched by recovery. I'm your host, Mary Foster, and today with me is Brenna O'Brien. Brenna is the Director of Clinical Consultants for JourneyPure. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me.
So, if you don't mind, tell us a little bit about what you do.
Okay. So I am, again, the director of the clinical consultant team at JourneyPure. And basically what they do is they go into clinical settings and they do mobile assessments as well as a little bit of case management. And they transition patients from a clinical setting to JourneyPure if it's an appropriate placement. If it's not an appropriate placement, then we assist in getting the patient to a different level of care or a different facility.
How do people know about Journey? Like, how do they know to contact you? At the hospital.
So it's kind of an interesting role. So a lot of what we do is going into the hospitals and educating on the fact that, yes, we do mobile assessments like a lot of other treatment facilities do. However, what's different about us is that we're licensed clinicians. So when we go in to talk with a patient, it's a lot, with the intention that, okay, we're trying to make sure this person is appropriate, but then also educating the families and educating the hospital staff as to why this person does and should go to treatment, whatever level of care that may be. So a lot of what we're doing is going into the hospitals, building relationships with physicians, case managers, therapists, and then they are comfortable in sending us referrals. They know that the client is going to be taken care of. They know the patient's family is going to be taken care of, and they know kind of what clinical services they're referring to. So some of it is, business development oriented, if you will, but the rest is clinical. So we can use skills like motivational interviewing and really help the client work through any kind of denial and getting them to the next step, which hopefully is treatment.
That's so cool. Did you go to school for this field, like college? Or?
I did. So I'm a licensed clinical social worker. So I have my undergraduate and my master's degree in social work. I went to the University of Tennessee, and actually Sam McMaster was one of my professors in graduate school. So I've always known him and respected him and his work and research. But it's funny because when I went into this field, it was with the intention of working with children and adolescents. So that was always kind of the population that I was very passionate about. Well, when I was in my master's program, we had the opportunity to do an internship. And the internship that was available was with a local psychiatric facility. And, the field placement instructor basically said, this is a really great opportunity. You don't want to miss it. So I jumped on board and did my internship at a psychiatric facility. And I worked on the dual diagnosis unit, which I ended up really loving. And it was with the adult population. And when I graduated, they offered me a job and they said, we want you to work on the dual diagnosis unit. Nobody wants to work on that unit. And I said, well, that's perfect because that's the only unit that I want to work on. And the reason for that is because I come from a long line of addicts on both sides of my family. So I think for me, it was just a very natural fit. And I just kind of felt like, hey, these are my people. I feel very comfortable interacting with them. So I eventually, was the social worker over that unit, which I did for 5 years prior to joining JourneyPure.
Awesome. Why do you think people didn't want to work there? Is it because it's so hard? Like the efficacy rates, like it's just so hard to find success or even know what that is.
Yeah, I think that has a lot to do with it. People think there's no hope. They're just going to relapse. Like they don't actually get better. We see the same patients over and over and over again. But for me, that's not what this field is about. For me, it's about meeting a client where they are, a patient where they are, and working with them from there. So whether that means they're coming in 7 times in a row before they actually decide they want to make a change, that's fine. I'm going to meet them there. That's what I would want someone to do for me. And I think, too, it's a different type of communication with this population. You have to be very willing to be upfront and just be very brutally honest in the situation. And for a lot of clinicians or therapists, that maybe is uncomfortable, at least in an acute setting. where you don't have as much time to build a rapport. You really have to be willing to sit down with someone and say, hey, like, what's going on? What do we need to do different? And confront the issue almost immediately.
What's the schedule like? So a typical person would work Monday through Friday, like business hours. Is that you, or do you have to work? Do people work outside of that?
Yeah. So with my team, there has to be a lot of flexibility involved. You know, when I hire someone on, I let them know up front, hey, you don't really know what your schedule is going to look like today. So, you know, they may wake up and have 3 assessments scheduled, maybe at a hospital or with a private practice clinician, and they kind of know what their day is going to look like. Or maybe they wake up and they're working on, you know, several pending admission cases. And so, you know, they're talking with families, or they're referring someone to a different facility. So they're doing some case management. But yeah, I mean, they never know what their day is going to look like. Typically, hospital hours. So 7 to 4 is when we're the most busy. But again, there are those conversations, phone calls in the evening. If an emergency department calls us and they need our assistance, my team will jump in the car and go. So there has to be, you know, flexibility and willingness to just jump in the car and go when you're needed. But there's pros to that as well. And when they're not doing assessments, you know, they're out talking to physicians and clinicians and, you know, building those relationships or managing the relationships that they have.
How educated are doctors and emergency room staff in this field? Yeah,
that's a great question. So when the referral is coming from a behavioral health facility, they are more educated on substance abuse and the levels of care that are appropriate. Again, with that, it depends on the physician. You know, some of our biggest referrals are addictionologists because they truly do understand and they're educated. So they're the ones that are more so pushing for someone to go to long-term treatment. Emergency departments and other settings, it's kind of a whole nother world to them. So in those settings, we really are educating, hey, this person does need residential, or hey, this person, you know, let's start them out at intensive outpatient and see how they do. Because in those settings, they're kind of going, I have no idea. I just know that they're reporting use and they don't need to be in the emergency room. So it just depends on the setting. A lot of the educating that we're doing is with the family. But then, you know, a lot of it too is the JourneyPure clinician. So we may, you know, send in a referral with an assessment that we think, you know, is IOP, and they may say, no, I think this person is a little bit more acute. Let's start them out at the residential level of care. So I'd say it's a team effort. It depends on the setting.
That's great because it's more like individually.
Yes.
And I know people hate to hear case by case basis. Like they just want all the information up front, but it really does sound like it's individualized based on what they need.
For sure.
So outside of your day job, what do you do for fun? Like, what are your hobbies?
Oh, my hobbies. So I love to dance. So anything that I can do dance-wise makes me happy. I recently have been taking a swing dance class and a salsa dancing class, which is really, really fun. I do a lot of yoga. Hot yoga is my favorite. I went yesterday and it killed me. It was awesome. And I also am a high school cheerleading coach for a local high school. They just asked me to do that, and it's the high school that I went to. So I'm really excited to go back. So I'll be doing that a few days a week with them. So again, that gives me that adolescent population.
Yeah.
So I get to really do both of my passions.
And tell me about your time being an NFL cheerleader. How long did you do it for?
Okay, yeah.
What was it like?
So I was an NFL cheerleader for 1 year. And it was really an awesome opportunity for me because I was kind of in a transitional phase of my life. And I just woke up one day and I said, you know, I want to do something that's just for me. And I want to do something that's really challenging, something to put myself out there that I maybe wouldn't normally do. And so I just started training and I showed up and made the team and had a really great year. It was one of those things where, you know, I did it for a year and I got back what I wanted to get out of it. And so, it kind of lined up and led me right into my position with JourneyPure. And so I really wanted my focus to be here. Being an NFL cheerleader, they say it's a part-time job, but really it's a full-time job. It takes all your time and all your attention, which again is really awesome. But I wanted to solely focus on like kind of my career and what my long-term goals were. But to be an NFL cheerleader to me is about being surrounded by really strong and smart women. I think that cheerleaders get a bad rep. People think, oh, there's nothing to them. Yeah. But for the organization that I was a part of, you had to be educated and you had to have a career and you had to be motivated and driven and well-spoken and a good example to young girls. So I really loved being a part of that and being a role model.
And it seemed like a lot of their mission is being in service too, which is funny just based off of your job. Like I noticed you're doing all the games and all the performance aspect, but also there's a lot of service, it feels like.
Yeah, absolutely. We did a ton of service hours and we're always giving back to the community and being part of the community. And even still to this day, it's really great because, I can advocate for the addiction and opioid epidemic through kind of my background. People are always encouraged to hear like, oh, this person that was a professional cheerleader was with the NFL. This is something they really care about. And so it gives me a platform to speak on something that I'm passionate about. So I love that it kind of gave me that segue.
And it's so cool too, because a lot of people, there's like a stigma surrounding addiction, but also like the treatment of addiction. There's like a lot of shady providers out there. So it's cool to be able to be a voice for like actual successful treatment and what that looks like, and also be a woman doing it because like I know for me this office is predominantly male.
I think about that all the time,
and especially in a director role. So you're a director.
I'm the only female director. Yeah,
that's what I was going to ask. So it's super cool to have you put it out there in that light as like a friendly, approachable way to talk about it. That's awesome. So one thing that when we were chatting with Cynthia a few weeks ago, people who are in service a lot, which it sounds like you're always working to take care of other people, a lot of times don't find time for self-care. What does self-care mean to you and how do you practice that?
Yeah, for me, self-care is really just a combination of a lot of different things. Self-care to me means living out my values, so things that are important to me. So I do a lot of yoga. So like exercise is a really big thing for me. Dance, which is a passion. I got to make sure that I'm doing that in some way, shape, or form. Also like to take care of myself physically. So I'll go get my nails done. So get my hair done, those types of things. But I'm really big on self-care and my team knows that. Especially being licensed clinicians, we are much more likely to burn out.
Right.
And so I just have kind of an open policy with them, like, hey, if you're struggling, please come to me. Let me know if you need to take a day. And they know they can do that, and we do that often. So, self-care to me is an everyday event.
And I like hearing about all of your fitness. It's something that I love too. Have you ever tried boxing?
I did try boxing once. It wasn't my favorite, but it was.
I super love it. I got into it based off of, this is true, but following all the supermodel Fitstagrams. They're all boxing in NYC.
I have a lot of friends that I used to cheer with that do the boxing, and they love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have anxiety myself, so yoga just does really, really well for me.
Yeah. Well, and that's important to note too, because I know it's something that JourneyPure publicly declares as an importance on, fitness, nutrition, sleep, things that go with holistic health. and more people seem to be adopting that, like in the addiction treatment space, because it is, some studies have shown that it is as effective as medication in treating depression and anxiety symptoms. So,
yeah, absolutely. I mean, they say that, for anxiety, that exercise is one of the best forms of treatment, but it's the most underutilized.
Yeah.
So, if I'm out there selling that to people and selling our program and what we believe and what we stand for, I have to believe in that and stand for that myself.
And I think it really, I love it. And it seems like fitness is becoming more and more of a trend. Like, it's cool to be healthy, which is helpful to the cause.
Yeah.
So for your career and where you see yourself going, how long have you been in your current role? And like, is this the top for you, or you're so young?
So I started with JourneyPure November 2016. So I've been here a little over a year, and it's been really exciting to see the growth and the change. I think we've really pretty much doubled since I started. So that's a really exciting thing to be a part of. And hopefully this is not the end for me. I've always seen myself as being a career person. I don't plan to ever stop working. What that looks like, I hope that I will be running this team for a long time, and I hope that my team will continue to grow. I started a year ago, just myself, and I now have a team of 5, about to hire 2 more. So we'll go from 1 to 7 in a little over a year. And so I want to continue to run this team, build this team, grow this team, make this team better, offer our services to more places. I've always wanted to be in private practice and be a therapist. I do a little bit of that on Saturdays on the side, adolescent females. So I think my long-term goal would be to build out my private practice more, as I'm more settled with JourneyPure and managing this team.
That's amazing that you also do that.
I know, I do a lot. I'm like,
you do a lot when you say it out loud. It's like, okay. When do you sleep? So if someone wanted to get started in the same industry, let's say they had a passion, or came from a family of addiction, or just really were touched by the space, how would they get started?
I love that question. And I love that question because when I was a kid, I would tell, my family or people what I wanted to do. And, their response would typically be, well, you don't want to really go into the helping field because you're going to struggle your whole life, and you're not going to be financially able to provide for yourself. And you need to think about maybe being a lawyer or being a doctor. And, as a kid, that just didn't sit right with me because I'm going, well, why are they telling me this? Not my heart told me that's what I want to do. And I found that that's not reality. I think if you follow your passion, you follow where your heart is, then the rest kind of will fall into place. So I guess to answer that question, if someone wanted to be in a clinical role, look at whatever clinical tracks you can take. For me, it was social work, and I was able to get my master's in 5 years. So it really just kind of fit in with my time frame, and there was a great local program. But I have, women on my team. I have LPCs. I have LADACs. So it really just kind of depends. Just looking at what programs are offered and what they stand for. With social work, I loved that route because there were so many different ways you could go with it. It wasn't like I had to pick one population or one setting to work in for the rest of my life. I've gone from a psychiatric inpatient facility to now working in the addiction field and working with adolescents on the side. So it gives me just a broad range of options and clients that I can work with.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
It's been so great.
Yeah.
Everybody, thanks for listening, and please be sure to rate and review the podcast with all the stars and glowing reviews. The Voyage Podcast is produced by Todd Schlosser. It's part of the JourneyPure network. I'm your host, Mary Foster. You can find me online at Mary Liz Foster. The Voyage Podcast is there too at Voyage Podcast. So follow us, like us, tell all your friends. Thanks.
Thanks.